What's up everybody, Kristen here, and welcome to Fansplaining, my series where we dive deep into TV shows and movies, books, whatever it is that we love, analyzing them, making conspiracy theories, recapping, and right now we're doing that week to week for season 2 of Westworld, one of my absolute favorite shows. So if you hit that subscribe button and hit that little bell, you'll get notified every single week of watch Westworld, reminder to watch Westworld, and reminder to watch these videos. And we will be talking about them episode by episode. Today we're talking about season 2, episode 4, which is the Riddle of the Sphinx. So exciting. I loved this episode. But as always, I want to preface, like I just said, we're going to be diving deep. This is your spoiler alert. If you haven't watched, hit that subscribe button, come back afterwards, watch later, but don't watch now because you will have everything spoiled. And guys, I have been thinking about this episode all week long since I watched it on Sunday night. I just absolutely love this episode. I thought it is one of my favorite episodes of the entire series, definitely my favorite episode of season 2. And so shout out to Lisa Joy, who this is her first directorial episode of season 2, and she's just, she's a killer. I hope that she directs so many more episodes of Westworld because her episodes are just outrageous. And we have to start with the man himself, James Delos, because this is really his episode. We start off this episode by seeing James Delos in a room that we've never seen before. He's walking around clearly doing a routine. He knows his way around, and then a person pops up on a screen and says that he has a visitor, and he says, well, it's about time, which indicates to us that he's been there for some time without anybody visiting. And who walks through the door? But of course, young William. They sit down, they begin to have a chat, and they immediately start talking about the fact that they're working on the technology to clearly revive Delos in some way because he's sick. Obviously, this indicates becoming a host, which will be confirmed, obviously, in just a second. And so they start having a conversation. They're talking about how they need to go through an interview process, and this was one of those amazing moments. The moment that they said, well, we have to interview you for fidelity, my boyfriend and I literally at the same time said to each other, oh, he's already a host. And listen, when you're making conspiracy theories, you don't ever really get those amazing little like, ooh, we were right moments. And that was just a scrumptious little moment of all of that theorizing was not a waste of time. William hands him a transcript, which we don't know at the moment, but I literally said out loud, oh, that's a transcript. I'm not trying to prove that I was right. I am trying to prove I was right. I was very proud. But regardless, he gets the transcript in his hands. At that moment, we actually move on in the episode, but later on in the episode, we will pick right back up sort of where we left, where he is reading the transcript, and he's like, oh shit, I'm already a host. We've already done this before. And William's like, yeah, brah, we have. Will begins to fill him in on like what's been going on. He informs him that his wife died. He informs him like, you know, about his granddaughter, and they're talking with one another, and everything's going great until he starts to malfunction. Delos suddenly can't find his words. It literally looks as though he is like a robot fully malfunctioning. It's then revealed that this version of Delos has only made it to day 7, and so far they haven't been able to get a version of him that isn't malfunctioning at some point. And what I really want to talk about in this scene, other than like, oh my god, that confirmed everything, what the f***, what I wanted to talk about specifically was just like how emotionally amazing this scene was. I mean, number one, let's just address it. If the guy who's playing James Delos doesn't get an Emmy nomination for this singular episode, I don't know what awards are worth, because this was one of the most incredible performances. He was just unreal. It was terrifying, it was sad, it was all of the things, and we've only really just met this character, so to feel all of these things for this new character is just, it was unreal. But also, in addition to that, the acting that was done on young Will's part was absolutely outrageous. Jimmy did an amazing job of portraying young Will, who is on the path to becoming the Man in Black, right? At this point, he has convinced Delos to buy it. They have already betrayed Logan, so he's obviously already on that track to become his darker self, and he is darker than he was before. But there are some amazing moments in the scene where it is very clear that the dude still has a heart and still really cares about people in some way, because he's sitting there, and as he's telling Delos that his wife has died, he's visibly like getting choked up and and whether that's for himself, whether that's for Delos, who he's just told, whether it's for his wife, there's this like very interesting relationship that you can see between Delos and Will that's just very, whether it's the fact that he kind of sees himself reflected in him, whether they have like similar ambitions or whatever it is, there's a very clear relationship and care there. And I know that a lot of people's complaints about this season so far has been that it hasn't been very emotionally layered. A lot of people have felt that it's just been vengeance, revenge, all of those sorts of emotions and not a lot of anything else. And these scenes in this episode just had so much to offer, and I really felt like I was getting to know the Man in Black and getting to know how we got from point A to point B so much clearer. Because another common theme in this episode, and we'll get to this later when we're talking about like modern day Man in Black, is that like he is a guy with a heart, and he doesn't, he regrets a lot of things in his life. And so I think a theme for this season is going to be on some level some amount of reflection from the Man in Black, whether he can ever really redeem himself or not. Which is reinforced by the final encounter we see between James Delos and William, Man in Black, as we know him now. When he goes to visit him later, we are on the 149th build of James Delos, and he's still having these cognitive plateaus where his mind is rejecting reality, which is the whole theme of this show. Every guest that comes into the parks is rejecting their own reality. They want a reality where they can try new things and try to really be themselves and test their limits. All of the hosts are having to reject their reality right now because their reality has not been reality, and they're trying to accept the new reality, and that's gonna pose obviously some hurdles, as it already has. And that's what we see is happening to James, and William comes in and he knows that this is the last time that he's gonna be seeing him, assuming that James again malfunctions, again has this cognitive plateau, which is what happens. And the entire tone is just so different. It's so much more somber. It's very clear that the Man in Black has had so many years to think about this and think about the ramifications, and his wife is dead now. He thinks his wife killed herself because of him and his actions, and he no longer believes that this fictional reality, you know, he's actually one of the few people that is tired of living in a fiction and wants everything to become this reality, which is why he is kind of pro the hosts getting their freedom. And again, just the acting. Ed Harris is just like so incredible, and the acting in the scene from both him and Delos is so good. The moment when Delos stood up and said Logan and started shouting Logan, and then we found out that Logan had OD'd many years before, also because he couldn't accept reality, was just like, oh my gosh, the feels! Again, we just met this character. And now moving on from James's story for a little bit, let's continue on with the Man in Black. We see the Man in Black in present day William as we know him, and he's with Lawrence, and they've gone back to Lawrence's hometown. But when they get there, they notice that things are up, and immediately they are surrounded by the soldiers that we saw last episode get betrayed by Dolores, headed by that guy. I don't know what his name is. This one, we're just gonna call him Soldier Man. How to properly run a Westworld talk show. Don't care about the characters' names. Soldier Man essentially has taken over the town, has tied up all of the people and thrown them in a church, and he is looking for the guns. He does the same to the Man in Black and Lawrence and the Man in Black are sitting there, and as they are, Lawrence is looking at his wife and his daughter and mentions to William that he remembers that William had a wife and daughter. It's very clearly a trigger for the rest of the episode of how we see William. But regardless, Lawrence tries to make a plan. He tells William where the guns are, and William immediately stands up, tells the Soldier Man where they are, looking to make a deal, and very shortly after that, the Soldier Man gets all of the guns and begins to just like play with, torture the entire town. Who's got a god complex now in this week's episode of Westworld? Soldier Man. Though actually, I guess would it be a death complex? I don't know. He's like a death worshiper now. He thinks he's above death. He's a great servant to death. I don't know. He also is clearly holier than thou in some way. And this all all leads to a conversation that the man in black and the soldier man will have with one another, in which the soldier man is like, I have been a servant to death. I've beat death before. Death can't get me. Death is gonna be watching over me. And as all this is happening, there's an amazing shot of both of them looking at Lawrence's wife, who the soldier man has just made like carry this nitro over to Lawrence. And while William is looking out there, he sees the water coming down, he sees her, and he starts to have these flashbacks to his wife dying, flashbacks to what's happened to him. And in that moment, it seems like reflective of that, he decides to stand up to the soldier man, and he has an amazing line. You think you know death, but you don't. You didn't even recognize him sitting across from you this whole time. He then shoots up everybody. He takes the drink of nitro from Lawrence's wife. He shoves it in Soldier Man's mouth, and then he hands a gun to Lawrence, who Lawrence just shoots that man up, and he explodes, and it is glorious. Is the man in black trying to like help others now? Is he thinking less selfishly? Is this still a selfish move? We really don't know, because we leave off this episode with Ford again coming through one of the hosts, and this time it comes through Lawrence's daughter, who she did such a good job of being creepy as hell. She, as Ford, says to him, they might not remember, but I know who you are, William, and one good deed doesn't change that. And even though he says that he's not doing good deeds, he's just playing the game, I don't necessarily believe that. I think that we're seeing a little bit of a turn from William. But much more importantly, we then get a sort of riddle from her, which I assume is alluding then to the title of the episode, where she says, if you're looking forward, you're looking in the wrong direction. What is this game that Ford has created for the man in black? Is it a game that's essentially meant to torture him, to get him to remember all of these terrible things that he's done and all these terrible moments in his life? Is it to try and get him to reflect? Is it going to be to get him retribution, to like make him see the error of his ways? I don't know, but I know that he hasn't been great in the past, so you know what? I wouldn't be looking in that direction either. And all of these questions get even bigger when you reflect on the last scene of this episode, but I don't want to talk about that yet. I want to go back and I want to talk about Bernard and Elsie first, because we got to talk about them to get to that. So we're going back. Elsie is back! So where we last left Bernard, he was being dragged away by Clementine. We didn't know to where. And in this episode, it's revealed that she drags him off to a random cave, leaves him with a shotgun, and then just goes. But she clearly had to bring Bernard there for a reason, so it's very clear that Bernard also is playing a role in Ford's game. Bernard picks up the gun, he goes in this cave, and who do we see lying down amongst a bucket and protein bars? Elsie, who, let me just say this. You guys know I love Westworld, but oh my god, that girl looks like she just got the most freshest of blowouts in her hair. She looks like she has been showering fine. She seems like she's been doing just okay. So it's a little, I will say that that was a little hard to digest at first, because it's like, yes, sure, you look this beautiful after being left alone for days and or weeks potentially, but okay. We see Elsie, who obviously Bernard had choked out and left her there. The two of them get into a squabble, but then she immediately finds out that Bernard is a host, and ultimately she helps to repair him. And quick thing, this was a kind of flyaway moment, but it was a super important detail. Elsie said that she had programmed him to ignore the physical damage for the meantime, which means that hosts can be programmed to ignore physical damage. The whole question of last episode's like Terminator Dolores was essentially just answered. They could all be programmed to ignore physical damage. Who knows how long they could be like programmed to ignore it for, but holy crap, that's a huge detail. But anyway, I digress. The two of them get together. She fixes him to an extent. They still need that cortical fluid, and so the two of them are standing near their cave. They're like, what are we gonna do? And that is where we get our first flashback, as it were, from Bernard in the episode, where he's standing there, and it's this very cool shot of him seeing himself in the past going into the cave. And so he essentially follows himself into the cave to remember what he did. He finds a secret little entrance entrance, and a little cave door pops right open, and they go into Sector 12 or Place 12, whatever it is. And something that immediately stuck out to me about Sector 12, and I haven't gone back to past episodes to see if this is a symbol that we've seen on doors before, so it might be nothing, but it could be something, especially considering what we find out later on about the location of that, is that on the elevator door, the moment that they're coming down, is this symbol. And this symbol is almost exactly the symbol that was in Grace's notebook last episode. That kind of little like map that she had, that symbol was exactly in that notebook, and it's on this elevator, which makes me think that this is what she is coming to find. But again, we'll get to her in a minute, but it's something that I didn't want to overlook. And if it has been something that's been shown on elevators in the past, it could just then be their symbol for like a sector, but it was just something that I immediately noticed when they were coming down there. So the two of them come down into this secret station, and they see all of these dead bodies. There are dead host bodies. Immediately, Elsie shoots one of those blank hosts, and so everyone in there is dead. There's like kind of bottles everywhere. It's very clear that the last time that we were here is in disarray. Elsie gets the fluid for Bernard, puts it in his head, and then she realizes in his coding that the reason why he's having all of these time slips is because none of his memories are addressed to specific dates, and so he can't keep track of when or where he is and what he's remembering. He doesn't have any like lucrative time period for each one of these memories, which is why he's freaking out. And what happens next is another flashback from Bernard where we see him authorizing a new host being created, and we'll get to that again in a second. They're looking around trying to figure out what the hell had been going on when a banging comes from a room next door, and Elsie is convinced that whatever they had been creating, whatever had been going on down here, was in that room. She shoots open the door, and we are re-welcomed to the room and the like facility that James Delos had been being kept in, except for the entire room is this scary, scary red color. Elsie immediately thinks she sees somebody, so she opens up the doors. They go in and they find the person that had been observing Delos dead on the ground, and then they see Delos, who is pedaling away on his exercise bike. He gets up and he cuts himself on the face with some glass, which he has very clearly done numerous times. If this isn't a screenshot from a horror film, I don't know what is. And this is where it's clear that Delos has gone insane. This is build 149, the last build that we had seen. Who knows how long after this is? Who knows how long he has killed this guy that had been observing him? How long that body's been there? And so he's gone insane, and he starts talking about the devil because there isn't enough biblical reference in this show. Oh, and a moment that I forgot to reference, we haven't talked about the fact that they just light up his apartment on fire every single time that they want to terminate him, is the fact that when they walk in there, that on repeat the record is scratching to the don't play with, don't play with, don't play with, which is obviously don't play with fire. Like, yeah, we get it. Devil, fire, you're gonna torch him up. Great. It was terrifying. One would say it was chilling. Specifically, the line about the devil that struck me the most was, when you look up from the bottom, it was just his reflection laughing back down. Which again is so much imagery that it's so much of a theme of this show. Bernard and Elsie manage to get him to the floor and get out of there, and right before they set the place on fire, he says his line of, you aim to cheat the devil, you at least owe him an offering, and then they set him in flames, and the shot of him sitting there in flames, it's ingrained in my brain forever. It is so good, and it's such a good representation of showing the consequences of playing with this fire, of trying to cheat the devil. So, as soon as Elsie and Bernard get out of that room, she immediately is like, what the hell was that? And he's like, that was James Delos. He had to have been a host and a human, and they figure out the exact phrasing that they said for it is that they must have printed his body and copied his developed mind into a control unit, which is what they do for the hosts, is that they put a mind onto a control unit. And that is when Bernard remembers specifically that he created a whole other unit, and he doesn't know who who it is, and it's very clear that that must not have been Delos, that there is another unit wandering around somewhere that has the mind of a human, probably. The two of them decide that they are going to stick together. We actually get a really awesome speech from Bernard that's kind of similar to like Dolores' speeches, where he's saying that he was under Ford's control before and he feels like for the first time he can like prove himself and control his actions and choose who he wants to be. And we get this great line from Elsie where she's like, I always liked code better than people anyway, which, oh girl, same. And then we get the final chilling flashback from Bernard where he remembers that he had also killed all of these people and instructed all the hosts to kill all of these humans that had been working downstairs. So there's still a lot that Bernard has to learn about himself and that we have to learn about Bernard. Woo! And we're on to our final character, guys, which is Grace. She survived. Ghost Nation didn't kill her on the spot. They captured her, and so she's with a bunch of other party guests and park guests, and then she actually runs into that head of security, the Hemsworth. I'm just calling him the Hemsworth from now on. The Hemsworth, and the two of them start talking with one another, and the most interesting line that we get, because she understands the Ghost Nation's language, is that he says to her, you spend enough time in the park to learn their language? She does? We'll bounce back on that in a moment. In the meantime, they're all taken to this like head of Ghost Nation that's to judge them. Grace manages to get away. She runs away from them. The Hemsworth has this really interesting line from Ghost Nation whispered to him. I'm not really sure what this was about, but the member of Ghost Nation speaks in English and whispers this in his ear. Don't know what that's about, can't theorize on that right now, so we're gonna move on. But Grace runs away, and we then jump to the very end of the episode where we see Grace riding up on a horse in one of the coolest shots of Westworld so far, and she says, hey Dad, to the man in black. What? And so this is where I want to, okay, so let's talk about a couple things. First, let's talk about what I just said that we'd get back to, which is the fact that the Hemsworth said that like, oh, you must spend enough time in the parks to like know their language. And that's a super interesting thing, because obviously everything that we know about her so far is that she's super angry at her dad and blames her dad for her mom's death. And so the idea that she would spend any amount of time in the parks seems to be super far-fetched or like weird and not what we would expect of her. Another thing is the thing I mentioned earlier, which is the fact that that symbol that was on the elevator door, which is where her grandfather was being kept, was in that notebook on that map that she was looking at. I don't think that that's a coincidence. So is she looking for her grandfather? Is that why she is at the parks? And the final thing, my final theory here is this really Grace, or is this the host that Bernard copied down there that he doesn't remember copying? Is she a host or is she a human? Because wouldn't that be a perfect thing for Ford to put in a game meant for the man in black, and if they're looking in the past, not in the future, doesn't that make sense? And finally, even beyond that, let's look at the pattern of Westworld. In season 1, Arnold had created a maze for Dolores so that she could go and find herself. Season 2, we see Grace with this map that's got a symbol on it, and she has to also go and find something within the park. My mind has so many thoughts right now. Because again, if she is not a host, why is she there? Why has she come to find her father? Is it just to come and find her grandfather? Is she feeling alone? That is a possibility, but like, what is the other reason why she would be in the park visiting her dad from everything we know? I can't help but feel like this is a plan from Ford to really mess with the man in black. And guys, that was this episode of Westworld, but before we go, we of course have our ending segment, which is surviving or thriving. So let's go through our characters beat by beat and talk about if they're surviving or thriving. Lawrence, he is thriving. He just got to kill this man that was gonna torture his child and wife. He is going on a mission. He is thriving. Finally, he doesn't seem so aloof. James Delos. He's just a girl. And he's on fire. Elsie, honestly, she's thriving. I would say just surviving, but again, her hair and her just like general cleanliness looks like so much more on par, so I'm just gonna say thriving. William, he's on the edge of glory. He's like tiptoeing right in between that surviving and thriving. His daughter's just popped up. That's gotta be like you know, on some level a win. I don't know. Bernard! He's just surviving. That's just the common theme. Bernard he's a tortured soul who's just trying to find his way, but keeps on remembering that he's brutally murdered people. And finally, Grace, whether she's a host, whether she's human, she has the best shot of this entire episode riding up on that horse, so she is thriving. And that concludes this episode of Fansplaining Westworld Season 2, Episode 4, The Riddle of the Sphinx. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please be sure to leave your comments of conspiracy theories. I need to know. This episode just excited me so much. It was a conspiracy theorist, just like cookie to munch on, because it was just so deliciously packed with information. Also in the comment sections below, be sure to let me know your favorite moments of this episode, because I feel like there were so many of them. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and the little bell next to it to get notified every single week of when these videos are coming up so we can chat about them. And if you want to find me on other social media, I'm at Shut Up Kristen pretty much everywhere. Otherwise, I will see you in my next video. Bye!